Thank you for joining us. This is the AutoGuide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kyle.
This week we have a lot in store. We'll start with a crazy Chrysler concept. Kyle drives a little Italian. Canada picks their favorite cars of the year. And we talk to Cadillac about my personal favorite car currently on sale. But first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, so let's get into it. So on Monday, Tuesday, I can't remember. Earlier this week, Chrysler dropped the new Halcyon concept car. I think it's important for three things. One, it's another Chrysler product because they only have a minivan right now with a 300 dead. Two, it's a car, not an SUV, which is nice. I mean, doesn't mean they're going to make a car. And of course, it's an EV, but we don't know power, battery, motors, anything. It's just, yeah. They did, though, make sure they pointed out that it would be capable of being charged by the road as it drives if the road had the charging pad built in, which, I mean, we've heard about for like decades, and that's never going to happen. Well, it could happen on like maybe here and there, but we're not going to have just electrified roads all through North America.
It'll happen in the Bay Area where the weather is the same for 300 days a year, and that's it.
Yeah, like here in Toronto or Detroit, I can't imagine this frosty just breaking the circuit and people getting electrocuted driving to work. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen. So it is a four-seater, and I mean, go to the article at AutoGuide.com to see more photos. Doors open, you know, like the old RX-8 or the Ion Coupe, or even like a Rolls-Royce where the back opens opposite of the front. It's pillarless. Because it's so low to the ground, there's a flap that pops up so people can get in and out. So it looks cool when everything's open. And the interior has some cool ideas, like it's got a big bubble glass because there's no motor or engine up front. So it goes way down to like almost your knees. So you get a great view. And then that whole glass is a head-up display as well. So being that it's also, you know, autonomous like every concept car is, if you don't want to drive, you push a button, your steering wheel and your pedals fold away. And the back seats will fold into the trunk, and the front seats can then go all the way to the back. So you have like a big lounger, and then you can like have all the constellations on your windscreen at night. So when you're looking out, it's like augmented reality, so you can see where they are. And there's other augmented reality things when you drive up to like mountain passes and whatnot.
Okay, so it would tell you it would tell you what you're looking at in terms of the stars.
Yeah, like on the windscreen, it has the outline picture, so you know like where it is and what it's. Yeah, like they have in the video. I mean, it's a cool idea, and I'm sure it'll come. And like the glass, you know, like in modern jets or even for homes, you push a button and they can go opaque or clear. So it could do that for you. And then you push a button, your wheel and pedals come out. Like a lot of cool ideas. The 15, I think 0.6 inch center screen can also turn, so you can either have portrait or landscape depending on how you want it. And then another button, it could just disappear. So I mean, it's a lot of cool ideas. Are we going to see them? Maybe like 1%. But it's at least showing that Chrysler still cares about maybe cars and style, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I appreciate that we are getting ever closer to the cars in Demolition Man, because that movie is set in, I think, 2032. So we're almost there.
Getting there. So then we'll have the Jetsons space pods.
Yes.
So moving on, you drove the Denali, which I've already driven, so we can both talk about it.
Yes. And that's your picture, because mine is the really excellent green, which is pricey, but I got so many compliments on it, and it's easy to forget as journalists, oh, it's the Dodge Hornet, it's the same thing. Most people don't know that because both of these vehicles are new, and they see the Alpha with the telephone dial wheels and the really nice paint, and they just say it's a good-looking little SUV.
Yeah, I haven't driven a Dart. I know, Hornet. Dart. I know you have. So I can't compare, but yeah, like it felt like the little premium SUVs, like the BMW X2s, and you know, like that class. I didn't get the green because I was late getting to the fleet, and all the good colors were taken. So I just went with Alpha Red. But yeah, it's not like groundbreakingly different, but it's not bad either. And the fact it's a plug-in and you get a lot of power will be a big plus. Like around here, that's great. You get your green plate, you get to drive in the high occupants lanes, and yeah.
It's true, and I found it. I mean, when you have a high charge, it works pretty much as you'd expect, and it's pretty fun. It has really quick steering. I think it's something like 2.3 turns lock to lock.
Oh wow.
So it's really agile and it feels fun. And there's, of course, being an alpha 4-cylinder, a pretty good soundtrack too. But there are some weird issues, like the 4xe powertrains in Jeeps, where if I was foot to the floor and it was in electric mode, it would sometimes take a second or two for the engine to kick in. So you've put your foot down expecting the combined amount of power, and you're only getting EV for a second or two. So that was a little disappointing and feels like it could be refined a bit. But the paddle shifters are great. Space is okay. It's a little on the small side, but that's okay. I think the tougher thing that the Tonale is going to have to overcome is just the sheer price of the thing.
Yeah. It's got the alpha starter button though, so maybe that's worth the cost.
At least a few grand, maybe.
So next, Chicago Auto Show was last week. So we talked about some of the cars that debut, but we had someone there, Lee Bailey, and he got some hands-on the different vehicles. So we'll start with the Kia Carnival, which is not a minivan, even though it's a minivan.
No,
neither the US or Canada will call it. They both have different names for it, which is interesting too. But when we did a comparison with it and the Pacifica, right? Is that what
yes, the road tripper edition.
Yes, and the Pacifica we've deemed the better vehicle, and the biggest drawbacks to the Carnival was the interior, and it didn't have anything but the V6. There's no hybrid or optional powertrain. So the new model, they've addressed both those things. I can't wait to get in one to see how the interior looks, because they really made a big deal about it and the photos look nice. I actually really like the exterior updates too. It looks more like their SUV family now. And having a hybrid, I think, is a big deal. Yeah, you're going to lose a little power, but like these aren't race cars. So losing like 20 horsepower to gain, maybe 50% better fuel economy, it's more than worth the trade-off.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like this hybrid powertrain that's in pretty much all the Korean models at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not as efficient as the equivalent one in a Toyota in all the cars that are comparable between classes. So I don't expect this to be as fuel efficient as a Sienna. But on the flip side, it probably has better road manners. And like you said, the styling updates look excellent. Like this might be my favorite looking of the MPVs, or maybe if Canada sticks with its old tagline, the LPV or LUV. Life utility, the love.
You just brought up a good point. As soon as it's around, I guess we're gonna have to compare it to a Sienna, because that is its direct competitor. And when we drove a RAV4 hybrid against the Tucson hybrid and the Sportage, the Toyota was better on gas. It felt more powerful, but the other two felt better in every other way. So I wonder if it translates to the vans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So while he was there, he also got us a story on the new Ford Explorer. It's not really new; it's a big update, but keeping the same engine. So you get the Turbo 4, the Turbo 6. It makes either 300 horsepower or 400 horsepower, which it's something sort of unique in the mainstream of this category. It's also a rear-wheel drive bias all-wheel drive system on the platform it's built on, which is also kind of unique. So Ford's kind of straddling between the Pilots and the Highlanders, and then the like Grand Cherokees of the world. So it's an interesting sort of combo. It's been a long time since I drove an Explorer, so I'm looking forward to trying this one out.
Yeah, I drove the 4-cylinder briefly a few years ago, and it was okay. I feel like, I also had it loaded up. I was driving it during a bachelor party weekend, and so we had it completely full of stuff and people, which kind of slowed it down, as you'd expect. And it was a mid-trim model, so the materials weren't exactly where I would expect, given the price. But like you said, it's more truckish and tows pretty nicely versus a lot of the mainstream ones. So if this builds on those strengths and no longer has all those recall issues that the Explorer suffered when it first debuted, yeah, it could be a nice, strong competitor in a really tough segment.
And if you have the 4-cylinder, even though they're not the same. You could go around saying, "Oh, this is like the turbo and the Mustang and the old Focus RS. It's the same thing." You know,
Yeah,
it's not. But
exactly.
all right, and the last story of the week is the Bridgestone Winter Driving Academy that I attended. We talked about it briefly last week. So since Steamboat Springs, and it's pretty cool because it's not just for media; it's for anybody that wants to sign up. And what I found interesting is they'll take anyone that has at least a learner's permit. So they have families that'll bring their, like, some states it's 14, 15, most states 16-year-olds there that live in snowy areas to learn how to slide and skid, because it's not just, you know, going around some pylons and just having fun. They have modules built into the cars to disable traction stability and even ABS. So you learn in it without the ABS how to pump the brake, which, I mean, no modern car has that, but it keeps making the car lock up and slide. So you're learning how to correct slides a lot as you're going straight. And someone who's not used to driving on the snow, it'd be a big deal. I mean, I've driven cars without any aids, including ABS, when I started driving. So I was somewhat used to it, but there's still a lot to learn. And then we did a really, really low speed circles. It's like a skid pad, but it goes up and down a hill and there's ice at the bottom. And the whole goal was to try to, in the icy part, get the back of the Forerunner to rotate with just weight transfer and then get on the gas at the right point to keep it kind of going and get up the hill. So you didn't want to do a big spin out or a big drift, and you also didn't want to plow into the front. And we're going like 10 to 15 miles an hour. It's so weird to slow because you can't sort of mask your inputs. You're on display if you don't do it right or if you do it right. So yeah, it's a cool school. I think people should check it out.
Yeah, I watched your little snippets of video because I was on another trip while you were doing it. And yeah, it looks impressive. And it's like you said, it's really great to get people to learn because it's a safe environment. And it's something that all of us who live with snow regularly have to deal with at one time or another.
Yeah, and us being media, they did a little extra for us at the end. They like we did the Blizzax, which is like their winter tire, but then they brought out their Weather Peak, which is their all weather tire. And I'm actually driving a different manufacturer's all weather tire on my car. So the first sort of wave of these tires were like not that great, but every time I drive a new all weather tire, I'm getting more and more impressed. It's still not as good as a Blizzax. Like you could feel the difference, but the amount of decrease isn't that great. And if you don't live in an area that's constant snow, or if you're someone that just won't go out in a storm anyway, it probably is going to be a good enough tire, assuming it lives up in the summer. But then at the end, they had us drive the Potenza High Performance All Seasons against Continental Contact Sport. And I couldn't believe the sideways, like lateral grip that the Potenza's got in the snow. I mean, accelerating and braking, it's an all season. And the Continental felt like an all season, but it's got really crazy side bites. So, I mean, if you live in, like, I don't know, like, let's say, so like Nashville, maybe, where you might get a little bit of snow once a year, that's not a bad choice.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, so we're going to move on now to the news. Okay, welcome back. So the news, the big story, at least for us locally, is the Canadian Car of the Year award was given out, which is run by AJAC, that Kyle and I are both members and voting members. I think some of it we got really right, and some of it I'm just curious what some of our colleagues were voting. But I think the formula that they went to is much better, and it's not like years past where some of the winners you're just like, what? Like, how did that work? I mean, so in this one, starting, like, the Prius won Car of the Year. That is the Car of the Year. There's nothing out there that looks as good, drives as well, and is so efficient and still somewhat practical. Like, it's just I did such a good job. And even with the all-wheel drive, it's also sort of an all-season, all-climates car to a degree. I mean, you drove one way up to the middle of nowhere 2 weeks ago. So
yeah, I'm right with you there. The Prius was not my highest ranked car personally, because I loved the Integra Type S, but it barely scored better. And I acknowledge right away that the Prius is definitely the right choice because it's a lot more relevant to more people than a 300 and something horsepower front drive hot hatch.
Yeah, I actually tried to get a Type R this week because I knew snow was coming, but it didn't work. And we'll get more into what I got. But yeah, like, I just think of it like siblings and parents. Like, any of them could buy a Prius. None of them are buying a Type S, as much as I love that car too. So yeah. And then the Grand Highlander won SUV, which it's not my personal favorite in that segment, but the drivetrain, the space, I get it. Like, it's a very good consumer car.
Yeah, I think it does something that Toyota has done very well for a long time, which is be good in pretty much everything and not have too many glaring weaknesses, right? And that's what the Highlander does. It fixes the main problem with the regular Highlander by having a much more livable third row. It has two different hybrid powertrains, so you can get pretty good gas efficiency even though you've got this enormous vehicle. It's easy to drive, it's comfortable. The higher trims have pretty nice trim stuff inside and a good amount of toys. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but yeah, I have no problems with this winning.
It's funny. Right before the awards started, I was at the ceremony and I was talking to another OEM and some other car reviewers and journalists, and we're chatting. And what you said actually is almost word for word what they said. They said that you get the score sheet, and like that OEM and other OEMs are amazing at something, but they kind of falter at other places, or they're just average, or maybe even just a little above average. Whereas Toyota, from top to bottom, are never at the front, but they're never even average. They're always just good, 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 good. Like they just put it all together, and then the pricing and fuel economy, like everything. So yeah, when you add up subjective scores as opposed to objective, it's usually on top.
Yeah.
And then the other two winners, which were both for electric vehicles, came from the same manufacturer too, which is unusual. So Genesis got the electrified G80 and the electrified GV70, one car and utility vehicle. And they're both fantastic vehicles. I was surprised they won compared to what they're up against, but it's just a testament to how well Genesis converted gas cars to fully electric.
Yes, yeah, and you and I were talking just before this show about how this seems to be a trend now for AJAC, because last year car of the year overall was the BMW i4, another vehicle that came as a gas form originally and then has an EV version, and we all love it. Everyone who's driven one. I very much like both of these Genesis models. I'm just surprised that they won, like you said, because the Ioniq 6 was also a finalist from Hyundai, and that's a really great driving EV that is, well, a little more approachable in price than the G80. And electrified GV70, also fantastic, and in my mind, the best version of the GV70. But it was up against the Kia EV9, which has just been, getting attention everywhere. So yeah, props to Genesis for winning. They are not bad cars. If Genesis is listening, or anyone who thinks that we're being critical of it, we're not. I'm surprised at the voting, but there were really good finalists across the board here.
Yeah, I was actually standing beside Genesis when they won both, and they were ecstatic. Because we all thought when the Prius won car of the year, the Prius Prime was up against the G80 because plugins of a certain distance before they need to be charged qualify for that. So we all were like, well, the Prime's going to win because it's the same car, just even more efficient. But yeah, it didn't. So
yeah.
All right. So the rest of the news, just sort of little things. So we got a little bit of pricing updates on the Equinox EV. No real surprise. We knew that it wasn't going to be the $30,000 car anymore, but this is sort of now confirmation. It will start at the 35, which is still pretty low for any EV. Never mind, a compact to midsize-ish one. And the single motor still gets pretty good range. So yeah, this could be sort of the trend of getting more practical mainstream offerings out there.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Rivian, on the topic of EVs, it looks like they cut prices, but they didn't. They just created new entry-level models for both the truck and the SUV, which is good by them. They just took some content out and gave people what they want to make it a little more affordable. And then we said last week, they have a whole new submodel coming that'll be even lower. So I think they're just trying to fill the gap. And, they got their name as the super high-end, crazy powerful EV maker, and now they're making more practical stuff.
Yes, and if you want an EV truck that doesn't rust in the rain, then you can always still get a Rivian.
Yeah. Moving on to something that burns a lot of fuel, the Vantage got its update, and I quite like it. I always have liked the Aston styling since like the original DB7 in the 90s, because it's been that same sort of language. But here, the little slits in the grill and the way the actual sort of mouth and grill has levels to it, it works really well. I mean, it's a bit of a departure. It kind of looks like a face, but I like it. And I mean, the engines are always fantastic. So
yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with a Mercedes V8. Sorry, Mercedes sourced. Although that's the wild thing here, right? Is they've added over 100 horsepower, and yeah, I mean, I'm great with it. And like you said, I've been a fan of Aston since I was a kid because of the styling. And I feel like this facelift has really brought back some of the early aughts styling, but modernized it, because when the Vantage launched, it was such a radical departure from the family styling cues.
I think they're maybe the number one car that photos don't do it justice. Photos make it look like it's just a cool car, like a good looking car, but regular. And then when you see it in person, the proportions and the shape, like it's very curved and like, yeah, it looks so much more presence and imposing when you see it in person.
Absolutely.
And then our final story has to do with BMW. So there was a event last week that someone might have been at, and some sources overheard that the BMW M5 Wagon could be coming to North America, which probably isn't true. But I mean, I'd love it to, but not holding my breath.
Yeah, as Mike alluded, I was at that event and I was at the table when the conversation happened that has been talked about a lot in the last few days. And so I'm going to be fairly careful with my word choice here. But from my understanding, how I got it the next day, it's not that it's been confirmed that it's coming. It's just that the next M5, which we know is a thing, and we know that an M5 Touring is a thing, BMW has homologated the models so that they could be available in North America, but there hasn't been a decision one way or the other on if the wagon will actually come here. I know that there's been spy shots where the wagon has been driving around in North America, but that doesn't mean that it's coming there, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of manufacturers test their cars in Death Valley for heat reasons. It doesn't mean that they're going to sell them there.
Yeah, and they go to northern Michigan in the winter for snow. It doesn't mean they're going to be there. Yeah. I don't think it'll come here, especially with all the high performance SUVs. But just the sedan, which we will get, I'm really looking forward to, because he put the XM drivetrain into something much smaller and lighter. Should be fantastic, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yes.
All right, so that's it for the news. I was at the Toronto Auto Show, which we'll talk a bit about more in detail later. And I got a chance to sit down with Cadillac to talk about the heavily refreshed CT5 V Blackwing. So we'll go to that after a word from our sponsor. This is the AutoGuide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Do you remember your first car? I sure do. I was fresh out of university and I wanted nothing more than a car. So I went to some dealers with two things in mind. I wanted a two-door coupe and I wanted a manual transmission. After looking around, I finally ended up with a 2003 Oldsmobile Alero coupe with a 5-speed manual and a 4-cylinder engine. A lot of people didn't understand why I bought that car, but I loved it. I would take it everywhere. I also wanted to modify it. I put a lot of parts on that didn't work. I put on some wheels and they ended up ripping apart my rear brakes and I had to get rid of them. My intake, my exhaust, my suspension, and some interior bits were all custom made. It would have helped so much if there was some sort of way that I could get guaranteed parts for my car back then. Another thing I loved to do with the car was I would take it drag racing. I would do low 15 seconds and thought I was so fast, which I wasn't. But you know what? I was having a blast and I was getting to run the car harder than I was allowed to on the street. I also went to a lot of charity car shows, road trips, and weeks up at the cottage. I had the car for almost 2 years until one day it was written off in a snowstorm in Detroit by a mail truck. It was a sad day, and I really miss that car. One day, maybe I'll get another Alero, but for now, I'll just have good memories of this car and how much fun I had with it. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. So welcome, we're at the Toronto International Auto Show, and I am here with Alex MacDonald from Cadillac. Welcome.
Thank you.
So if you could just tell us what your title is at Cadillac and exactly what it is, just so our viewers know and listeners.
Sure. I'm Chief Engineer, Vehicle Chief Engineer for the CT4 and CT5.
All right.
That's the title. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the CT5. It's not a secret. I had the Blackwing about 2 years ago and absolutely loved it. Still think about it a lot.
Yeah.
So that brings me sort of my first question. With the sort of refresh redesign, Was the plan always to keep the Blackwing in the lineup?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's a beloved product. I personally own one.
Nice.
I should say my wife personally owns one. Yeah, there was never a discussion about that not continuing.
Okay. Yeah, when I had it, I mean, I have a family, just a son and a little dog, and it was just the perfect for what I like, because I got the V8 sound, the manual transmission, but it's kind of unsuspecting from the outside.
Right.
It's very luxurious. Put it in comfort mode, you know, the family doesn't complain. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah. So speaking of the manual, the take rate we heard in the last presentation is very high, over 50%, I believe.
Yep.
Was there ever any consideration to bring the manual down the lineup a bit more, like in the regular V model?
Oh, interesting. No, I think it fits really well, and I think it's a high take rate with the Blackwing customer. I think as we look at other products with manual transmissions, it doesn't bear out that way much of the time. So the Blackwing really is a nice place to put the manual, keep the take rate high, put it in the hands of customers who are really excited about it.
So like the V probably is a slightly different customer that's buying that as opposed to a V Blackwing.
Yep, the V is a very balanced car. It's offers all-wheel drive. You know, there's a lot of things that round out the V in ways that work really well with the 10-speed automatic. Yeah.
So this is a little on topic with the Blackwing, a little off. Kyle Patrick, who I work with, we had a discussion on a previous podcast as what will be the last V8 as people are sort of thinking about.
Right.
So my guess would be the GM small block, because it's used in so many products and it's sort of core to the company.
Yeah.
I know Cadillac wants to go electrified by 2030, so maybe it won't be in a Cadillac to the end, but do you think that's an engine that can make it to the end compared to, say, a Ford or a Mercedes?
I mean, it's my favorite engine in the world, so I hope so. But yeah, it's a great engine. It's got a huge history, like you say. It's huge volume.
Yeah. I mean, it's used in a lot of products, which is what I like. You can't replicate the sound of that engine.
And for me, the small block, it's especially the supercharged 6.2 in this car. People talk about horsepower per liter. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I want horsepower per size of the box the engine fits in, and nothing is remotely close to the small block. I mean, it's not even a discussion.
Yeah.
If horsepower per cubic inch of engine, which is what we care about, and maybe per fuel economy or per any of these things, the small block is just dominant. It uses displacement to get there, but that's the right answer. It has AFM, so you've got 4-cylinder mode to gain the efficiency. Like, it's just a brilliant package.
There's a reason, like, the jokes LS
and everything, right?
Because
exactly.
It fits because it is a smaller package. You know, people say, "Oh, it's push rod, this and that," but that packaging makes
that's the right answer. I mean, every engineering choice is a compromise, and I think the compromises around push rods in particular are often definitely the right ones. And the small block just bears that out. Yep.
So with the CT5 and the CT4, they're nearly the last sedans left in the GM lineup. I mean, there's one still kicking around, but is there a reason why a luxury buyer still prefers a sedan, say, over a mainstream buyer that's kind of abandoned the segment?
Yeah, I think the luxury and sport buyer, there are things around ride and handling that you just can't get in anything taller than a sedan. Every time you move the CG up, physics says you're not going to get all the way to that level of ride and handling balance. And so with Cadillac, with isolated precision, the idea of having your good ride and your incredible handling, that's enabled by a low sedan shape. Aerodynamics are better. So I think we're finding the home where, you know, our CT5 volumes this year are spectacular. They're really, really good. So I think we've found where that sedan, where those attributes matter to a luxury performance buyer, fits really well. And that's where we're finding success.
So I might be wrong on this, but the CT5 sales is actually picking up momentum, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, to a good degree. So that's why I think, like I said, I think we found that spot where these attributes really matter to this customer, and they just won't find this experience in anything taller than a sedan.
All right. Yeah. So kind of continuing with this sedan idea and the sports theme, with everyone kind of going to EV, there's always the question, how do you keep the performance and excitement alive? And I know some manufacturers are making sort of simulated manuals and others are using sound. Is there anything that Cadillac's looking at that they can use to, you know, enhance the driving experience on electric cars?
We do, you know, in the Lyric, there's enhanced sound and those kind of things. So we certainly are in that technology in our EV space. I think we look to folks. Again, I joined this program after this car was fully formed.
Okay.
So I number one, I get to brag about it with a little bit shamelessly, but also all that experience stays in Cadillac. So I think as you look at who's doing the cars, who's developing the technologies, we get the right people looking at the right aspects for excitement like the Blackwing. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
This has been insightful, and we'll go back to Kyle and I talking about the news. All right, welcome back. As you may have been able to tell during that interview, I'm pretty excited for the new model. It's been 2 years since I drove one. I still think about it almost daily.
That's true. He talks about it on a regular basis.
Hoping that they become not future classic collectors. I'm almost certain they will be, and I could get one affordably used in a couple of years, but we'll wait and see. All right, so now we're going to move on to what would normally be viewer listener questions, but this week we didn't really get any questions. We got a lot of rants. So we'll start with that. People are really writing off the CX-70 because it's a CX-90 based vehicle without the third row, without anyone having even really much sat in it. Like there's a handful of people at the auto show, never mind no one's driven it. So I'll hold my thoughts till then. I mean, lighter, maybe better weight balance, maybe they've done something different to the suspension or even the transmission tuning. Like if it is just a CX-90 without a third row, I was like, okay, maybe it needed its own name, but the rants about how it should have been a 60 or it should have been 60 based and stretched. I mean, it is 60 based. The 60 and the 90 are on the same platform. It's just one of the modular ones that can change size. So it's not like there's some other magical platform that Mazda's keeping in Europe. They just made a CX-50 size vehicle for Europe called the 50 size vehicle called the 60. There's a 1-inch difference in overall length. So I can see why you didn't want the 60, and then they made the 70. I mean, would I have preferred more coupe-ish shape and in between the two in size? Yeah, but it is.
I mean, that moment there when you were trying to figure out exactly which one was which kind of proves the rant's true, at least somewhat, right? Like this is a little confusing in terms of naming conventions. But like you said, we don't know what's being done with the suspension tuning or the transmission or anything like that. And so, and Mazda, that's a brand that really does care about those sorts of things. Look at how many yearly tweaks they make to the Miata, just kind of playing with it and adjusting. So I'm excited to see how they change this. And I'm really hoping that there is a noticeable difference behind the wheel, because that will help justify this new model.
Yeah, and sticking with the naming, how the 60 and the 50 are almost the same size. Like maybe they should call it the 80, and like the even number, sort of like how BMW does even odds. The evens could have been like the sportier, less practical cars, and the odds could be the like family oriented. But anyway, we'll wait and see. I get it. I mean, I have been a fan of brands and cars and thought it was completely ruined when I first saw it, and sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. So yeah, we'll wait till we drive it.
Yeah.
So since that's the only real comment we had many times, I have a question that people brought up on a recent trip, and it's, what's your biggest automotive regret? Now, since you don't have any advance warning, I'll go first.
Okay.
So, I mean, I have quite a few. Time and place. You're like, you didn't buy a car, you did buy a car, you didn't go on a trip, or you did. But my number one, I think, has to do with this poster back here. Is my SVX. I bought a 97 SVX in, I think it was 2012, and it was amazing. Like, it was owned by one owner, and it was his summer car, and he was an older gentleman who didn't drive much anymore. So it had like 70,000 kilometers, so that's like 45,000 miles. There was no rust, which is a huge deal on those cars because their quarter panels rust. The clear coat was coming off the spoiler and places in the roof, but that's an easy fix. The only real issue was there's a hole in the air conditioner condenser tank, so I'd have to replace that. Inside, it was immaculate. The suede and the brown and all that, it was 97, so I didn't have to worry about the stupid power seatbelt. All the buttons worked, like the power button, and it had a CD player replacing the old tape deck. So yeah, I ended up selling it after like 4 months because I got a crazy deal on a 1990 Miata that had 300,000 kilometers, but it had been repainted, new top, and it was like a third the price of the SVX. So I bought that and just flipped the SVX, and then I had a lot of fun in the Miata over the years. But I want the SVX back more than that. So it's almost like I kind of wish I never ran into that Miata as much as I enjoyed it, because I'd probably still have that SVX, or would have eventually probably taken off the road and put it into summer duty like he did. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I
then
mean, it's not a good car. Like there's a lot of compromises, but it was just quirky and cool. Like drive-throughs were impossible in that car with its half window. There was no headroom for anybody. The back seat was pointless, but it was still just so cool.
So it kind of sounds like a Camaro in a way. Drive-throughs are
all-wheel
useless.
drive.
Rear seat is terrible. I mean, it's basically Subaru's Camaro.
Yeah, like I'd have to go to drive-throughs with my arm kind of like this, because the window would be here and you're trying to like do it. Yeah, it was unusual, but I just love the look. And that those flat sixes Subaru used to make were so nice. So the transmissions would blow up, but again, it was a 97, so it was a little more sorted out by then. So yeah. Oh well. Do you have one?
I mean, not like something that I got rid of. I just wish that in my 20s, I would have saved every penny I possibly could have to buy an Integra Type R before they became stupid money. As someone who owned a regular third gen Integra when I was younger, I still miss that car. On the trip up north 2 weeks ago, myself and one of my colleagues, we were browsing Bring a Trailer or Kijiji in Canada. We were looking everywhere for just clean used Integras, and now even regular models go for a fair amount of money. And so Type Rs are just so far beyond reasonable, and it just makes me sad because I feel like I'll probably never drive one at this point.
So 3 quick things on that.
Mhm.
You'll probably know what I'm talking about. But we have a colleague that used to be in PR and has now moved over to motorsports in a brand that owned a Type R in his 20s. And I talked to him a couple times a month, almost weekly. And yeah, he's still kicking himself for selling it when he did, because he had bought and sold it before the boom. And I remember when I was in a car club, one of the guys went and traded in the car that we all had, and he bought an NSX, a first gen. Well, it's the only gen we had in North America. But he bought a first or second year red with a black top, like amazing condition. And this was probably 2010, probably maybe 2009. And he paid like 40,000 for it. And we're all like, oh, that's a lot for a used car. If it's NSX, we get it, like whatever. And if he still has it, like what an investment over 10 years, because that thing's probably quadrupled, if not more, because his was in great shape. And like we were all just in awe looking at it. But it's just one of those, like, good on him for pulling the trigger, and they weren't bad. I remember when I had my RX-8 in the early 2000s, like when they first came out, RX-7 FDs could be had so cheap relative to what they were. Like they still cost a lot. That's why I got the used RX-8 instead of the FD, because the RX-8 was newer and it was a little cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact they could have ponied up maybe 3,000 or 4,000 more and got an RX-7, and yeah, like what they're worth now, like it's insane. But that's why some of the cars that are around today, I'm like, I wonder if that's going to be one, and I should try to get one of those and hold on to it. But you never know. Who knew that the 90s Japanese nostalgia would be like Gen X's muscle cars for boomers, where they're going for ridiculous money at auctions, like way more than the car is worth for the experience. But it's just the remembering your youth. So
Yep. So yeah, I thanks for bringing up that question, Mike. And listeners, I'm just going to say it now. If you have any questions you want to ask us for future podcasts, shoot them our way. We're happy to hear them.
Yeah. And we want to hear about the cars that you regret not buying, selling, or I have some too, the ones you actually regret buying. So
yeah.
It's funny. Someone asked me, like, what car do you regret the most? And whoops. I don't know. I can't say. There's a couple. But I always say the car that gave me the most problems is also one of my favorite, and that was my RX-8. It was so unreliable, but it was so much fun. It was such a good long-distance cruiser, minus the gas stops, but it was so comfortable. It was fun. It was good in the winter. But man, did it break down. Anyway, so moving on to what's next. While we're talking about Mazda sports cars, yes, I ended up this week with the Miata, because I mentioned last week that I had to try to find something new. And it was good because I wanted to see what it's like to use it as a commuter car, not in the summer. So not when you put the top down, because commuter cars are always small and good on gas and somewhat affordable. So this isn't overly affordable, but it's small, it's good on gas. And I'll have a full review. It's not as like automatic. Oh, of course, as I thought it would be. There are some drawbacks, but even driving on a highway in like the third largest city in North America in traffic not moving, it was still fun. Whereas like not many other cars can do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I also want to point out to all listeners, because we figured this out a few months ago, that the current Miata is now the most affordable brand new convertible that you can buy. So, if you're looking for top-down fun, that's the one. It is affordable. It is a
The
affordable
crown
car.
off of I think the Mustang and Wrangler are both in the running for quite a while, but I guess they've exceeded that now.
Yeah, for both of them for 24, because their updates, they're just more expensive now.
So Kyle, why don't you let people know where you were this week? I know you can't really talk about what you did, or sorry, what you drove, but you can tell them what you did.
Well, I can talk about what I drove. I just can't tell you what I thought about driving them. So I went from northern Canada 2 weeks ago to Portugal last week with BMW to drive the new X2 and then 2 Mini Countryman models, the John Cooper Works and the SE, the electric model. Yeah, so I can't really talk about much more about that other than the roads were very nice. It rained for a little more than we probably would have liked, but it still led to a lot of very pretty photos. And yeah, you're going to start reading about all of those models starting very soon after this podcast releases, and it'll be on a weekly basis. So you will hear about them soon. But unfortunately, I can't really tell you much more about that, except I can say that the Mini Countryman SE's interior is so cool. It's full of recycled materials, but there's a really nice knit along the dashboard and doors. And it's a blue and a brown, and it sort of intermingles and changes as it goes from front to back. And so it looks great. There's a lot of cool, fun, smile-inducing materials and features inside the Mini that only Mini can really pull off, right? Like if any other brand did it, it'd seem kind of try hard, but when Mini does it, you're just like, cool, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had the Untamed Edition Countryman, and I said the same thing. I said not many cars could pull this off, but since it's a Mini, yeah. And both those, the SE and the X2, I'm looking forward to, because that's sort of like in the wheelhouse of cars that we have. And the regular Mini I want to drive as well. It's funny, though, how you're talking about the recycled materials inside, because back in the day, saying like, oh, the interior is recycled parts meant like they're just diving into their bin of leftover parts and putting like, cobbling together some crap interior. But now it actually means real recycled pieces that make new pieces.
Oh, no, you're talking about what Tesla does currently with old Chrysler stocks.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm talking about what GM did in the 90s too. All the Americans were guilty of that, but yeah. All right, so moving on, as I've said a couple times, I was at the auto show yesterday, Toronto Auto Show. It's the largest in Canada. This year, there's actually quite a few Canadian debuts and even global auto show debuts. So like the Infiniti QE and the, I can't remember the QX80 electric one. I think it's like Monolith or something. We got to see those. The 80's huge, like you'd expect, but kind of cool. I mean, they're just like design study shells, are not vehicles, but the XE has some really cool things to it. So I'm looking forward to sort of how that translates in the end. The show itself, some manufacturers came back. There's so much to do in the buildings. This isn't really the new car stuff, but in the basement of the North building, there's a Ferrari display, and it has like, if anyone's even remotely into Ferraris or old cars, oh my God, they have a 288 GTO, an F40, a 308, a 356. Yeah, it's just all parked together, and you're just like looking around in this one room. Like I'm standing in, several $1 million worth of Ferraris in this room, and it's really cool. There's a Tesla Cybertruck, so I got to see one in person, and it's as big as I've been told, and it looks as sharp, and it's everything I was told it was. This may be overly harsh, but I think it could be the next DeLorean. I don't think it's gonna kill Tesla or anything, but I don't think it's going to be around too long in its current form. There'll either be a radical redesign or they'll replace it with something. I mean, it's cool they went so crazy with it, but there's a reason no one's tried to do that before. And I know like the owners and fans love it, but I get it, because it's a cool car. It's like how like the SVX, like there's a niche for it, but it's not translating to the mainstream.
Mhm.
It's getting a lot of attention. It's funny. It's parked right across from all the Paganis and McLarens and stuff. So, and there's like this little walkway, and I was talking to the guy that's in charge of the Pagani McLaren. He's like, this is going to be the worst spot all show because everyone's going to be like, stop looking at both sides and no one's going to be able to move. So,
Yeah.
all right. So look ahead, Kyle, you're home for what, 2 days and then you're on the road again?
Yep. Just like last week. I'm home for a little bit, and then actually Sunday, and this is a holiday weekend for us Canadians, but on Sunday I travel down south again to drive the 2025 Ram 1500. I'm looking forward to it, as we've talked about, I think, before. Trucks are always such an interesting thing because it's such a huge market, right? There's so much variation for each model. And Ram has done a pretty significant update here. They've dropped the V8. They've brought in the Hurricane inline 6, which we've said before is a great engine. You really enjoyed it recently in the Grand Wagoneer L. So yeah, I'm just very excited to drive it. I've been watching some other journalists head there, and as far as I can tell, we get to do off-road and on-road. So
Nice.
Exciting
Yeah,
time.
we had it at the auto show to look at the 25, and I spent a lot of time in a 24 Hemi Limited this summer. So when I'm very interested to hear your thoughts, and I want to really try when it comes here. I had no problem with the engine, but I just want to see what it's like. So, and then next week, this is a very Mazda intensive episode apparently, but I returned my MX-5 for a CX-30 Turbo. Which is sort of a return to it. I haven't driven one in a while, and that class has exploded. Yet it's still one of the very few that offers this kind of power. So I just want to see if it really does stand out and how it compares to the regular models.
Yeah,
sorry,
Oh.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's still one of my favorites in that class, but that's because it's my wife and I, we don't have kids. And I know that the back seat is tight in that. So I'm very curious to hear from you what it's like living with for a week as a family.
Yeah, I mean, it is tight, but it's no CX-3 tight. It's there's others in the segment that are around it, but it's performs better. It's stylish. It's just sort of a little different. And then Kyle, when you get back from your trucking, you have the last of a dying breed.
It's true. Yeah, we were talking about this recently. The last in segment cars, and the 2024 Camry TRD is the last V6 mainstream sedan.
Yeah, midsize. Yep. Yeah, because I mean, I'll consider the Maxima midsize or mainstream. It's sort of premium. It's always been a little odd, but
And it's
the Camry. It's kind of sad because I love that they threw 300 horsepower into a front-wheel drive family sedan and gave it those crazy looks. And I know it's sort of like NASCAR inspired, which makes sense. But I got up close with the new car, and it's a decent looking car. But I'm just gonna miss that. That V6 was fun. So yeah enjoy your last time with it.
I should also probably clarify, it's the last naturally aspirated V6. I was just thinking about that, and I was like, oh, there's plenty of V6 sedans that size that are turbo and probably luxury models, but yeah, it's the last naturally
mainstream
aspirated.
no. Yeah, because the Koreans dropped it. All of the Americans and Mazda don't even make them anymore. I mean, the Malibu's in its final days. The Accord's long gone to turbos and hybrids. So yeah.
So
okay, well. Yeah, that wraps it up, I guess. So thanks for listening to the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. We'll be back next week. Actually, next week, I think we're going to talk not just about your experiences with the Ram, but we're actually going to have Ram on here to talk about the new truck. So it'll be a very Ram-intensive episode. Should be fun. So we'll see you then. Thank you once again for listening and watching the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.